Before Napoleon, before Caesar, before Alexander the Great, before TikTok, there is one man who would take a collection of squabbling city-states and turn them not only into a powerful kingdom, but the world's first ever empire. This man was Sargon of Akkad, the first man to conquer the world. "5,000 years ago, a time where the largest kingdoms consisted of a land area smaller than most US states. Civilization was in its infancy, only being found in a few pockets around the globe, and written language had just come onto the scene. Arguably, the most prosperous and advanced culture around this time lay in southern Mesopotamia, the Sumerians. The Sumerians are the oldest civilization to exist on Earth that we know of, inventing many things. Writing, glue, ziggurats, and math. Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Anyway, all around them emerged other cultures. To their east were the Elamites, to their west were the Amorites and Egyptians, and to the north were the Akkadians. Not much is known about the Akkadians, or Akkad, before the rise of the empire, but we know a few things. While the Sumerians and Elamites were a very distinct people from their neighbors, speaking languages with no relation with other languages, the Akkadians were a Semitic people. Now, when most hear that term and think of anti-Semitism, the term applies to a lot of Middle Eastern languages and peoples. The Jews, Arabs, Amorites, Babylonians, Assyrians, Phoenicians, Ethiopians, and of course the Akkadians. We also know that their culture was somewhat similar to their southern neighbors. They emulated their writing and worshipped their gods, for the most part. Overall though, the region was a backwater. But that would change in 2300 BCE, with one man, King Sargon. Sargon's early life is a bit of a mystery. Well, to be honest, his whole life is a bit of a mystery, with very little text about him surviving into the modern day. And what is written about him, we're kind of unsure how much of it is legend and how much of it is true. But anyway, according to legend, his mother was a high priestess, who gave birth to Sargon out of wedlock. To keep this a secret, she placed her newborn son into a basket, then sent him down the Euphrates River where he was taken in by a gardener in the Sumerian city of Kish. After this, all we know is that Sargon became cupbearer for the king of Kish by his young adulthood. But while a job like that to us today might seem like a pretty low-ranking servant kind of role, it was actually a fairly prestigious one, giving Sargon a place among the upper class. One night, Sargon had a dream that the king of Kish was drowned by the goddess Aina in a river, and afterwards she gave her favor to Sargon. Now, while most of us would realize that telling other people about a dream like this can't be good for your health, Sargon, told everyone about his dream, including the king, to his face. Obviously, after hearing this, the king tried to get Sargon assassinated, but his own people failed to do so he sent Sargon as a messenger to the king of Uruk, Lugal-Zagassi. The message asked for him to kill Sargon. Instead, Zaiyise partnered with him to invade and conquer Kish. After this, there aren't many records of what happens for a while, but eventually Sargon comes to rule over the Akkadian heartland in Kish. Him and Lugal-Zaigi soon after take arms against each other, with Sargon winning a complete victory against Uruk. Beforehand, Uruk had already united most of Sumer under their command, albeit very recently and loosely. With the conquest of Uruk and a few later battles to bring the other cities under his command, Sargon now controlled almost all of Sumer and Akkad. But that was not enough for Sargon. Oh no, he was going to conquer everything. He conquered Mari and Ebla, stretching his empire from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. But even that wasn't enough. He went east and conquered Elam and Marashi. He went south and conquered what is now modern Qatar. And depending on what sources you want to count, he also conquered Canaan, Cyprus, and some of modern-day Turkey. While being conquered by a foreign power is not an ideal situation, it has its perks. The order the empire brought allowed for a more stable society, that allowed for more trade, a revamped series of irrigation systems to allow more food to be grown despite the region becoming less and less fertile as time went on, and a larger focus on the arts. The Akkadians not only emulated the Sumerians when it came to sculptures and carvings, but even managed to surpass them in a lot of ways. Their language, like mentioned earlier, is a lot different than Sumerian, as it's related to most Middle Eastern languages, except when it comes to the written word. Akkadian uses cuneiform, but cuneiform was invented specifically for the Sumerian language, and does not mesh well with Akkadian. Think of it like all the weirdness with all the inconsistent rules of the English language and how a lot of words are written far different than how they sound. Akkadian would become the lingua franca of the ancient Near East, being the native tongue of the later Assyrians and Babylonians, and spoken by many others in the region as a second language to communicate with. It would take over 1,000 years for the language to finally die out, being phased out with Aramaic in the 9th century BCE. Alright, let's get into the biggest mystery of the Akkadian Empire, its capital, Akkad, also sometimes referred to as Akkad, although that's a bit confusing, with the general region being referred to as that too, so I'm going with Akkad. Legends say that Sargon himself founded the city, but tablets mentioning other kings of the city dating from before his life have put this claim into question. It's more likely that Sargon either restored the city from ruin, revamped the city to a level of splendor it had never seen previously, or possibly just made the whole thing up, because there's one huge problem when it comes to Akkadian history: the capital has never been found. Sitting somewhere beneath the sands of Iraq lies a treasure trove of art, history, and artifacts. With such a huge part of their history being missing, most of what we know about the Akkadians is written by later civilizations, like the Assyrians and Babylonians. If we could just find the city, it would fill so many gaps in our knowledge. While we have a vague idea of where it might be, unlike Nineveh, Uruk, or Babylon, Akkad has never seen light in almost 4,000 years. Why though? One possibility is that the city was renamed at some point, or another city was built on top of it. Some speculate that it might be sitting below the modern Iraqi capital of Baghdad, since we know at the very least that Akkad was very close to Baghdad. Or it could just be sitting in some random spot in the Arabian desert, waiting to be discovered. Later in Sargon's life, his empire began to experience issues. Being such a massive entity for its time, revolts happened a lot. Legends say that a massive revolt that included every people from within the empire, with the exception of the Akkadians themselves, taking arms against Sargon and laying siege to the capital. Somehow, against all odds, Sargon won an astonishing victory and reconquered the rebelling lands. When Sargon passed away in 2279 BCE, he had ruled for over 55 years, an impressive reign for an ancient monarch, let alone a self-made one. Upon his passing, Sargon's eldest son Remish took the throne, only to have the whole thing fall apart all over again, almost. Numerous Sumerian cities and other lands rebelled. Remish managed to reconquer the rebelling lands, like his father, but at a horrific loss of human life. On a plus side though, unlike in a lot of other societies, his daughter, Inhudina, got to become the High Priestess. So good for her. Remish did not reign for very long, and was assassinated. And then his brother, Manish Tutu, took the throne. For a first, Manish Tutu didn't face an all-encompassing massive rebellion, and even managed to conquer a coalition of kingdoms in what is now the modern UAE and Oman. But it was during the reign of his son, Naram Sin, that the empire would see its peak in power and territory, but not before he faced his own massive, all-encompassing rebellion. But that's to be expected at this point. Naram Sin had a fairly big ego, being the first Mesopotamian king to have God as one of his titles. He was also named King of the Four Corners of the World, because as we know, the world is flat. It's this arrogance that led later generations to refer to him as basically being cursed, seeing himself as equal to the gods, despite all his accomplishments. And never again would another Akkadian king have such a magnificent reign. Not long after Naram's death, the Akkadian Empire began to fall apart. For like the 17th time now, various regions began to rebel and break away from their control. The regions on the outskirts of the empire first have been the Levant, the Mari, Lagash, Uruk, and Elam. By the beginning of the 22nd century BCE, Akkad had been reduced to mostly just the homeland itself. And unlike in the past, no one would be able to put the pieces back together. Being reduced to a medium-sized state was bad enough as it was, yet it was gonna get a whole lot worse. A nomadic people known as the Gutians would come along and take even more territory from Akkad, reducing it to basically only the capital. Not long after, the Gutians would conquer this last rump state, before the Sumerian city of Ur would unify Sumer under their rule and conquer them, beginning the 3rd dynasty of Ur, otherwise known as the Neo-Sumerian Empire. How such a large and powerful state could fall apart so quickly is a subject for debate. I mean, don't get me wrong, nomadic people have brought many civilizations down in the past, and the Empire had a civil war every Tuesday, yet there seems to be more than just that. Some scholars believe that a drought and decreasing levels of fertility in the soil created enough starvation and social unrest to significantly weaken the country within. Another thing to keep in mind is just how small in relation the Akkadian homeland was to the rest of the empire. And additionally, Sumer was a whole lot richer and more populated than Akkad itself. With all these factors combined, the Gutian invasion was only the straw that broke the camel's back, and killed the Akkadian Empire for good. Never again would there be a true successor state to continue Sargon's legacy. For the next century, Mesopotamia would be ruled by Ur. Before they collapsed, the Amorites came in and merged with the Sumerians and Akkadians to create the Babylonians, while the north would be conquered by the newly formed kingdom of Assyria. In the grand scale of things, the Akkadian Empire didn't even last that long, not even 2 whole centuries, which seems short compared to Assyria's over 1,000-year lifespan, or Egypt's several thousand years. While Sargon's empire didn't last all that long as a nation, and would be surpassed by others not long after, his legacy has lived on ever since. His empire laid the groundwork of administration for the ones that followed. The Akkadian language managed to become the common language of the Fertile Crescent for over 1,000 years after his death, and he proved to others that one man could conquer the world. Countless Middle Eastern rulers tried to emulate Sargon, often fighting with each other on who the true heir to Akkad was, much like the Roman Empire here in the West. The first of these great kings to take on Sargon's torch and carry on his legacy to become king of the universe was Hammurabi of the Babylonians. And next time we'll take a look at him, his empire, and how Babylon carried the torch of Sumer and Akkad from their rise to Alexander the Great. I'll see you all then.